A decadent vegan Black Forest cake that will take just an hour of your time to make and have everyone wanting another slice. I like to think of this as my second installment in the cake no one will know is vegan category. You loved my simple vegan carrot cake, so I decided since we're coming up on Valentine's Day and this is our first recipe video back after a long break, I wanted to show you some love with this one. So hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications, and let's bake a cake. First, I'm making the 2 layers of the moist chocolate cake. Preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and prepare 2 8-inch circular baking pans. To prevent the cakes from sticking, I spread a thin layer of vegan butter in the tins, dust the tins with cocoa powder, and to be extra safe, I cut a circular piece of parchment paper the same size as the bottom of my pan and place that on top of that cocoa dusting. I use cocoa powder to dust the pans when I'm making a chocolate cake because if you use white flour, you might see a bit of a white dusting around your finished cakes. With cocoa powder, you don't see that. I honestly keep this beside me while I bake because I make a mess. Don't we all? I'll get it with soap and water too, but this was a handy Christmas gift. Thank you to my father-in-law. I make a mess when I bake, so it's coming in handy. In a large bowl, combine the dry ingredients. 2 1/4 cup white all-purpose flour, spooned and leveled. This is key. Whenever you're using flour in a recipe and using measuring cups, make sure you spoon your flour lightly into the measuring cup. If you scoop out of your flour bag with the measuring cup, or if you pat the flour down, you'll actually be using more flour than the recipe calls for. And in this case, your cakes will turn out dry. So just lightly spoon the flour in, and when you get to the top, you can kind of level it off with a knife if you need, but I find that usually makes more of a mess, so I just spoon it till I get to the top. Next, sift 1 cup cane sugar and 3/4 cup cocoa powder. I sift these so no big clumps sneak into the mixture. Then add 1 1/2 teaspoon baking powder, 3/4 teaspoon baking soda, and 1/2 teaspoon salt. Stir all those dry ingredients together until they are fully combined. In a separate mixing bowl, whisk together 3/4 cup unsweetened applesauce, 1 cup plant milk of choice, I'm using oat milk today, 1/2 cup vegetable oil, and 1 tablespoon pure vanilla extract. Make a well in the dry ingredients, pour in the wet ingredients, and stir to combine. Use a folding motion to make sure that flour is fully incorporated. Scrape along the sides of the bowl, scrape down to the bottom, swipe through the center of the batter, and make sure there are no streaks of dry ingredients that are hiding in there. When all the batter is fully combined, pour the batter into your prepared baking pans. You can use a kitchen scale if you have one to help make sure you're pouring an equal amount of batter in each tin. You can use a cookie scoop to scoop the batter evenly, or just eyeball it as best you can. Bake the cake layers on the same oven rack if possible for 28 to 30 minutes. This is the first time in Tasty Thrifty Timely history that I can just step back and open my oven. A thing of beauty. You will know your cake is done when it's dry on top, the edges have started pulling away from the sides of the pan, and a toothpick inserted in the center comes out clean. Let your cakes cool for 10 minutes in the pans, and then turn them out onto a wire cooling rack to cool completely. Once your cakes have cooled completely, you can cover them and store them in the fridge until you're ready to layer up your cake. And I love that I can bake these cakes the day before I'm going to layer it and serve it. And actually, the cakes become more fudgy after spending some time in the fridge, so it's a win-win. And another great thing is that you can make the quick cherry filling while your cakes are in the oven. To make the cherry filling, open a jar of pitted sour cherries in syrup. Cherry pie filling is a little different, so look for these. Drain the cherries from the liquid, but reserve that liquid. Add the drained cherries, a 1/4 cup of the reserved cherry syrup, and a 1/4 cup cane sugar to a small pot. Bring the mixture to a low simmer. Meanwhile, mix 2 tablespoons cornstarch in a small bowl with a tiny bit more of that cherry syrup. Stir until the cornstarch is dissolved in the liquid. The slurry should be thick but pourable. When the cherries in the pot come to a simmer, add the cornstarch slurry and quickly stir it in so the cornstarch doesn't clump. Quite quickly, the sauce will start to thicken. Continue to cook the sauce at a simmer for a couple of minutes to cook off that cornstarch flavor. Add 1 teaspoon pure vanilla extract into the cherry filling and remove from the heat. Allow this cherry filling to cool completely, and then you can refrigerate it so that everything is nice and cold when you go to layer up your cake. And with that cherry sauce that we reserved from the jar of cherries, you can brush this syrup onto your cakes once they've entirely cooled. And this is especially helpful if you suspect that you may have overbaked your cakes a little bit and they seem a little dry, or you can do what I do and just put it in the fridge and use it in a smoothie or in an oatmeal the next day. The final step to this vegan Black Forest cake is to make the whipped cream frosting. I've made my coconut whipped cream for you a few times. It's super quick, it's ready in 5 minutes, and all you need is 2 ingredients. You can use a 19-ounce can of coconut cream or 2 of these smaller cans of full-fat coconut milk. The reason I choose to use coconut cream in this recipe is that, first of all, I find it in these bigger cans, and second, it has a higher concentration of the full-fat cream that we need to make this whip up really nicely. But with either of these options, the key is to refrigerate your can for at least 24 hours before you try to make the coconut whip. What happens in the fridge is that the full-fat cream hardens and rises to the top of the can, and the water content sinks to the bottom. So when you take your can out of the fridge, try not to tip it or shake it, just gently open it up and then scoop that hard cream off the top. And another tip for success with coconut whip is to put your mixing bowl and your whip attachment in the freezer for at least 15 minutes before you make the whip so that everything is as cold as possible. Woo. Nice and cold. Scoop the hardened coconut cream out of the top of the can and into your cold mixing bowl. Leave the coconut water in the can. Getting any of that coconut water into your mixing bowl will make it harder to whip up the cream. Turn your mixer on and whip the coconut cream for about 1 minute on a medium speed until it starts to fluff up. Add in 1/3 cup icing sugar and continue mixing until combined. I like to add a 1/4 teaspoon vanilla extract for a touch more flavor too. After another couple minutes, your coconut whipped cream is fluffy and ready to frost your cake. Now you can frost your cake right away, or you can refrigerate that coconut whip until you're ready to layer up your cake. If the whip is a little too hard when you take it out of the fridge, just let it sit at room temperature for a couple of minutes and it should be easily spreadable after that. Now, 99% of the time, this coconut whipped cream works perfectly. Every once in a while, you might get a can where the cream hasn't hardened enough. And maybe that's because your fridge wasn't quite cold enough in that spot, or that particular brand or that particular can has a lower concentration of that full-fat cream that we need. So if your whipped cream is a little droopy, there's more of that water content, it's not really whipping, you can try adding cream of tartar or a starch like cornstarch or tapioca starch by about 1/2 teaspoon at a time to try to get that whip to firm up. Another trick that I actually haven't tried myself, but that baker Aaron McDowell does, is to add cream cheese into whipped cream to stabilize it. This will change the flavor a bit, but if you haven't had good luck with coconut whip and you want to be extra safe, you can have a plant-based cream cheese in your fridge in case you need to put a little bit in to firm up that whipped cream. Or also have a couple cans of coconut milk or coconut cream in your fridge in different spots in case you get one that works better than the other. But I don't want to scare you because 99% of the time it works perfectly. I have tried store-bought coconut whipped cream as well, and it was still a little droopy, so I do prefer my homemade version. Now we have everything we need to layer up this cake, but there's one last thing I'll show you just in case your cakes have domed a little bit. These aren't bad, but just so that we don't have any whipped cream or cherries sliding off, I'm gonna even out the top of this cake. This is really easy if you have a cake turntable, but I don't, so I'm just gonna use a cutting board. So grab a serrated knife, and just where that cake starts to dome, just gently score a really shallow cut all the way around the edge of the cake. Maybe you can like speed this up. Now that you have that shallow guide cut all the way around, kind of continue to do what I was just doing. And instead of moving the knife through the cake, actually just turn the cake through the knife. So my hand with the knife is staying steady, and I'm not making a sawing motion through the cake. I'm actually just turning the cake on the knife until it goes all the way around. And you can pop the top of the cake off, and that's a pretty surefire way to get a nice even cut. And with this extra cake, you can eat it. You can make small pieces of it, and let me finish eating. And with this extra cake, you can eat it, which I've already been doing. You can cut pieces of it and put them in mason jars and layer it with some extra whipped cream and make little trifles, or you can mash the cake all up, add some extra frosting, some other add-ins, and make some cake pops. It's nice and moist, it's rich and chocolatey. Look at that. Snack for the cameraman. How's it taste?
Oh yeah.
Good. Just give us a minute. Lay 1 cake layer on your serving plate or cake stand. Spread a good amount of whipped cream frosting and half the cherry filling in a single layer on top of the whip. One last tip is that now that we have this cut top, when you go to put the top piece of your cake on, flip it over, because it's more likely when you're frosting that you're gonna get little bits of cake in that frosting as you try to spread it. So for the top layer of your cake, flip it around, and that way you'll have a smoother cake layer to frost. Place the other cake layer on top, spoon more coconut whip on, and finish with the remaining cherries in the center. You can keep the sides of the cake bare like this, or if you have more frosting, you can spread a thin layer of frosting all around the edges. If you're a better cake decorator than I am, then you can pipe the frosting. If you have extra frosting, you can frost the sides. You can make it really pretty with some chocolate shards or curls. Or if you're like me, then you can be really happy that you got a cake to this place and just stop here. This cake costs us just over $18 to make, which is comparable in cost to if we were to buy a cake from our grocery store, and also comparable to if we were to make this a traditional Black Forest cake. The applesauce in place of the eggs and the coconut cream in place of heavy whipping cream might even save us a couple dollars. This recipe is in the description below. Let me know in the comments how you like it, how your friends and family like it, and please subscribe. We have a new recipe video for you every 2 weeks. And next Sunday, we are dropping our long-awaited road trip video for our trip across Canada. So hit those notifications so you know when we post. And in the meantime, eat cake. I know I am, because we have 2 Black Forest cakes in the fridge.